Yo, 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 Eager J, but you can call me Dre, and today we're going to be talking about the day one new release, Tearlaments. Let's get it. First things first, let's talk about what we're going to be talking about in the video. It's going to be an introduction to the archetype of Tearlament and kind of the idea of how the deck works. So if you're new to the deck, playing Master DUEL, you're kind of going to understand how it works. And then we're going to kind of go over the basis build that we have here. It's not exactly the most optimized build. It's a day one build kind of that I have going on, but I think that this is kind of going to be more of the way that you will succeed with the deck on Master DUEL rather than compared to how it was played in the TCG, if you did play it in the TCG. But yeah, let's get into the card by card and kind of understand exactly how the archetype works. So first things first, the Tearlaments are all fusion based. Obviously it's a fusion based deck. All of the cards themselves fuse without having to use fusion spells. So the idea basically, right, is that there's 4 monsters total. There's one, the Tearlament Rhinoheart. This is a warrior. He's the only warrior 4-star in the deck. He's not aqua like the rest of them. He's also a water, which is really important compared to the rest of the Tearlaments being darks. There's basically 1 warrior monster, 1 starter monster, and then 3 mermaids. So the idea basically is this starter monster, right, is the one that starts off the entire combo, whereas the rest of the Tearlaments are basically mermaids that have the same effects to be able to fuse for the most part. So first of all, let's start with Rhinoheart. Rhinoheart, basically when he's normal summoned or special summoned, you can send 1 Tearlament monster from your deck to the graveyard except himself. So he is basically Armageddonite. If you're familiar with that card, you can basically normal summon him, activate its effect to send a card to the graveyard. If he's sent to the graveyard, pay attention, it's only 1 Tearlament monster. If he himself is sent to the graveyard, you can special summon him from the graveyard but banish it when it leaves the field. So remember that, so that way it doesn't stay in the grave. Unless you overlay with it, it will go back to the grave. And if you do, send 1 Tearlament's card from your hand to the graveyard. So in order to activate its secondary effect to special summon itself back from the grave, you have to basically have a Tearlament card in hand. That's kind of the idea. Cool. And the next thing is going to be one of the mermaids. So we'll start with Sharon. So Sharon, he has the same stipulation as the rest of the mermaids. If it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, so this is really important, right? If this card is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can fusion summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck by placing fusion materials mentioned on it from your hand, field, and or graveyard, including this card from the onto the bottom of the deck in any order. So the idea basically is when this is sent to the graveyard with another card, you basically use it to fuse into whatever's in your grave, whatever's on the field, and whatever's in your hand. So this is really oppressive and really strong. It's obviously once per turn, but we have 3 of these, so 3 chances to do so. When this is sent to the graveyard, you basically use itself as fusion material. It has to use itself first, and then the secondary material, and that could be either another tier monster, or that can be a fusion monster that's on the field, or a fusion monster in the grave, or that can be a Shadal monster, you know, anything basically to create a fusion monster in your extra deck. So the idea is that once this is sent to the graveyard, you're able to get off to the races and start fusing. That's the strongest thing about this form, about this archetype, sorry. Cool. His first effect, her first effect, so all of them have the same secondary effect, all of the mermaids at least, both Havnis, Merly, and Sharon, all 3 of them have the same secondary effect to fuse. The first effects are different. So during your main phase, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, send 1 monster from your hand to the graveyard, then send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. This card is probably one of the better ones out of the mermaids. I think honestly they're all broken, but there's a level to each one, right? There's an argument between which ones are best. This one's pretty good though. Being able to send a monster from your hand and then being able to special summon itself, it just creates an extender, and more importantly, it's a level 4. So this puts you into your rank 4 engines, and even gets you up to Baron de Fleur if you need to, if you're able to do that as well. So basically what you would do is you activate this, send a card to the grave, and mill 3 off the top as well too. So you send a card from your hand to the grave, mill 3, and that's 4 cards in the grave, including 1 that you chose from your hand. So already you're kind of fusing, and you don't know what you're milling as well too. So it feels a little gamba, but it's honestly not. The way that you play the deck, it's honestly not. Cool. Tearlament's Havnis, when your opponent activates a monster effect on the field, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. So this one specifically, again, it has the fusion stipulation, but the most important thing is that it's a hand trap, and some people will argue that this is the best one, because when your opponent activates a card, any monster effect on the field, so say normal summon Tearlament's Rhinoheart, or activate effect to kick Callus on the field, when they activate anything on the field, even the sprite cards, if you guys are more familiar with the sprite cards, activate Gigantic Sprite, boom, special summon something from the deck. you get to go ahead and chain Hovness effect, mill 3. That gives you a chance during your opponent's turn, say you're going second, that gives you a chance to be able to hit a fusion on your opponent's turn and be able to play on your opponent's turn. Even better, hit one of the Ishizus, which we will get to in a bit as well. Cool. Tearlaments Merly. Tearlaments Merly, the last one, it's a level 2, which is big because it can make Elf and it can be summoned off of Elf. So that's actually pretty important. If this card is normal special summon, you can send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. So not only having the fusion stipulation, when it's normal summon, it's basically card trooper. So you'll be able to normal summon it, send 3. It'll get you out of some sticky situations if you really need it to be. And more importantly, it's another mill that you could do off of the combo with Kit Kalos. When you summon Kit Kalos, you can summon Merly from the grave as well too, and get a free 8 mills basically. And it helps a lot with that. And it having 2k but is pretty nice. So it'll be pretty big. Cool. We can go into the rest of the cards as well too. So let's talk about Pearl Reno. This is sadly one here, but this is probably the most important card in the deck, I would say, only because of not only does it add your card obviously, but it makes all your Tearlament monsters gain 500, makes all your fusion monsters gain 500, which is so big in this game. It's if it was at 3, it would be insane. It even is still insane right now. If a Tearlament monster you control in your graveyard is shuffled into the deck or extra deck, you can target one card in the field, destroy it. So every time a Tearlament card is shuffled in from your graveyard to the deck, or basically I think it's from the field as well too, huh? Oh no, it's only from the graveyard. Okay, cool. So only from the graveyard into the deck, if you shuffle in any of these cards, basically it triggers the Pearl Reno to be able to pop something. So this is going to be your main removal, your main MST kind of, I guess you could say, or your main like destruction if you can get to it. I think also more importantly to remember as well too is that off of Keldo and Medora, which is the shufflers in the deck, right, you're able to trigger this as well. So if you ever need to trigger this while it's on your side of the field, just using Medora or Keldo to be able to trigger it off is pretty nice. Cool. Tearlament Scream, I think this card is really good, and I think it's going to be really underrated for going into here. A lot of TCG players realized how good this card was while it was being played, or while the deck was being built. I think this card's really good, and I think we should definitely be playing it. If a monster is normal or special summoned, and you control a Tearlament monster of Visa Starfoss, you can send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. Also, for the rest of the turn, all monsters your opponent control lose 500 attack. So that's actually super important. At least the 500 attack boost is really nice because it basically makes all your opponent's monsters smaller, right? So it makes it so that in the mirror that you're playing, you're able to swing over their monsters if you have the Scream up and they don't. So you're always able to beat their monsters out. And if they have Pearl Reno as well too, you also have Pearl Reno, then the Scream will end up being the difference, right? And if we don't have Pearl Reno up and they do have Pearl Reno up, you're at least able to tie with their monsters while you have your own Scream. Also, it adds an extra send 3 for every summon that happens, as long as you control a tier monster. So say you normal summon Rhinoheart, you're able to chain block and not get ashed. So the idea is you go normal summon Rhinoheart chainlink 1, Scream chainlink 2. Basically they can't ash or respond to the Rhinoheart being summoned. So it basically just protects you from your effects. Same thing with Kit Kalos. If Kit Kalos hits the board and you decide to save the Scream until then, you can summon Kit Kalos and make Scream chainlink 2, right? So that way that you don't get ashed on your Kit Kalos, which is still really important. Cool. And then lastly, if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add one Tearlament trap card from your deck to your hand. So this just makes it more consistent. So where the idea is, if you're able to mill this card, milling this card and seeing this over any of these creates another chain block as well too. So say you mill Sharon while you're milling 5 off of Kelbeck. Say you mill Sharon effect, fuse chainlink 1, and then Scream chainlink 2. That way they can't negate this with orange light or something, right? Cool. And then obviously it adds a trap as well too, and getting to the Solyak is super important, especially in those grindy matchups. The biggest thing I'm seeing, at least the biggest issue that I'm imagining is going to happen with this matchup, especially here in the on Master Duel, is the time, right? Because a lot of the times you're going to be in situations where you're playing for a really long time. So if you take long times on your turns, then it's going to take a minute. And a lot of these chain links, they lead up to chain link 8, chain link 9. They get really big, especially when you're both milling Agitos, both milling Kelbecks on your opponent's turn, and you guys are trying to hit each other, you're trying to Medora shuffle each other. That's kind of the idea, right? You just don't want to have to go into that huge game state where it's oh man, we're gonna have to I'm gonna start having to play a lot faster because my time on the clock is running out really hard, and then you end up losing in time. I can see that happening a lot already. I've already kind of had an issue with it, even just testing the deck a little bit just on the clock. Luckily the clock isn't super small, but when we get to Duelist Cups, it's gonna be kind of an issue because 180 is not a lot of time, and you're gonna have to play really fast and really loose to be able to quickly end games. And I think that's why a couple cards are pretty important. Yeah, and then Solyak, let's talk about the trap card. I think this one's better than Meta Noise. Meta Noise is the book one. I think currently right now we don't need Meta Noise, at least not until Cashier comes out. But I don't think Meta Noise is a necessary card. This card's probably the best card though in the deck, because not only does it give you something nice when it's milled, but also it has a lingering, because it's a continuous trap. It lingers onto the board, so you can use it during your turn and your opponent's turn. And not only that, if you have Rule Kalos up, you can send it off of Rule Kalos. Or you can set, off of Rule Kalos effect. So if you control a Tearlament monster or to beast a Stargrass, you can target one effect monster your opponent controls, negate its effects, then send one monster you control to the graveyard. If this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can add one Tearlament monster from your deck to your hand. You can only use each effect of Tearlament Zodiac once per turn. So this is basically imperm. You activate it, send a tier from your field. So say I have a Zodiac on the field, I basically send my Merly, boom, negate a monster, and then actually on resolution fuse with the Merly that I basically sent. Pretty cracked. Not only is it reactionary in the sense that it'll be able to negate your monster's effect, it's also technically a starter to get your fusions into the grave, so that way you can fuse. And then most importantly, if this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can add one Tearlament monster from your deck to your hand. So if you mill it, it's Rhoda. You get to add any of the tier monsters. It's just really good. Not only that, you can send it off of cards like Kaleido Heart. You can send it off of cards like Kit Kalos if you need to dump it to be able to add one. It's just crazy. Cool, let's go into the fusion monsters. The first one, the starter and the most important one, Tearlaments, Kit Kalos. This card is so strong. There's a reason why they put it to 1. If this card is special summon, you can take one Tearlaments card from your deck and either add it to your hand or send it to the graveyard. So basically what you do is you'll summon this, activate effect, and either send a card to the graveyard or add it to hand. This is any Tearlaments card, so you can add Scream and Zodiac, so either or, you can add either or, right? And then its secondary effect, which is also just as important, you can take one you can target one monster you control, special summon one Tearlaments monster from your hand to the graveyard, and if you do, send the target monster to the graveyard. So the idea is target one monster on your side of the field, so usually it targets itself, send itself, and then special summon one monster, one Tearlaments monster from your grave, so usually it's either Rhino Heart or Merly, and then chain link. Once that resolves, if this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, so if he's sent to the graveyard, he gets to mill 5. So the idea with Kit Kalos, obviously this is 3 effects, this card's insane. You basically just summon Kit Kalos effect, add a monster or a trap, and then activate effect of Kit Kalos on the grave, targeting itself, tribute itself, special summon back Merly, and then chain link 1 Kit Kalos, chain link 2 Merly. You get to mill 8 total because Merly mills 3 when she's summoned, and then Kit Kalos mills 5. If instead you want to do Rhino Heart, you can go Kit Kalos, target itself, send to the grave, special summon Rhino Heart from the grave, chain link 1 Kit Kalos to mill 5, chain link 2 Rhino Heart, obviously, send 1, and then you're off to the races. Basically, it's just the full starter, right? It's big. It's a great card. It does a lot for the deck, and it's very easy to make. Just one Tearlament monster and one Aqua monster. That's why a lot of people are trying to run King of the Swamp and stuff like that. We can talk about that a bit once we get into like the actual deck profile. Cool. On to the next boss monster, Tearlament, Rule Kalos. This card is basically your Nibiru proof card. Other Aqua monster you control cannot be destroyed by battle, which is pretty big. You can only use each of the following effects of Tearlament, Rule Kalos once per turn. When your opponent activates a card or effect that includes an effect that special summons a monster, right? So when your opponent activates a card or effect that includes an effect that special summons a monster, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. Then send one Tearlament's card from your hand or face-up field to the graveyard. If this fusion summon card is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can special summon this card. So this card basically, it makes it so that you don't get nibbed. It also makes it so that anything that they activate, so any of the fusions that they activate, if you're playing the mirror, if they activate Sprite Starter, if they activate Gigantic Sprite, you can activate this, tribute basically a card or send a card from your hand face up on resolution to negate and destroy it. So what you can do is if you have Zodiac in hand and you haven't set it or anything yet, basically you can summon this and then send Zodiac from your hand to be able to activate its effect. Or you can just send itself if you don't have any material. Usually you want to have material, but if you don't want to have to send anything, like you can send the Rule Kalos itself and then it'll just bring itself back. Remember that stuff is once per turn, so you don't want to have to do all of that stuff. You don't want to have to do that twice, so not having to send Rule Kalos twice. Make sure you're only sending it once. Yep. Card's still good though. It gives us the boss monster kind of a negate. Lastly is the Tearlament's Kaleido Heart. Dude, this card's crazy. It's probably my favorite card in the deck, honestly, because there's so many different things that you can do with it. It's just really flexible. The only issue with it is what you have to use to make it, but it's still really easy. It requires 1 Rhino Heart and then 2 Aqua monsters. Big boss monster cannot be used as fusion material if this card is special summoned, or if an Aqua monster is sent to your graveyard by card effect while this card's on the field. You can target one card your opponent controls, shuffle it into the deck. If this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can special summon this card, and if you do, send one Tearlament cards from your deck to the graveyard. So this is big, right? one important thing, can't be used as fusion material, so remember that. That's really important. If this card is special summoned, or if an aqua monster is sent to your graveyard by card effect while this card is on the field, you can target one card your opponent controls, shuffle it into the deck. So if an aqua monster is sent to the graveyard, or if it's special summoned, it basically spins a card. It targets, so that's still pretty important, but being able to shuffle it into the deck bypasses a lot of stuff, makes it so things don't float. If this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can special summon this card, and if you do so, same thing as Recallus, right? If it's sent to the graveyard, but it also sends a Tearlament card from the deck to the graveyard. So what a lot of people will do is that they'll Proto Reno, pop itself, right? Or you can Baron effect, pop the Kaleido Heart, send it to the grave, Kaleido Heart effect in the grave, bring itself back, and then send any of the tier cards. It sends any tier card, so you can send Celiac, you can send Scream, you can send Rhino Heart, like you can send anything, right? To be able to trigger any of these effects. Crazy card, a lot of implications, really good, not only just when it's summoned, but also when a aqua monster is sent in general. Cool, so that's basically my quick breakdown of Tearlaments and the archetype itself. There's way more to go into, and there's way more complicated stuff to talk about, but one big thing I do want to bring up is I'm going to be making a how-to video on like basically how to play the deck and going in depth into the actual combos on what you, not necessarily the combos, but basically the thought process you want to have to think about when you're playing, while you're playing the deck, and while you're activating cards in the hand, and when you're thinking about how to play your hand out, because there's so much to do with the deck, to be honest. But I think that will be a big help for a lot of you. Cool, so let's go ahead and go through the card by card with the deck profile. First things first, I did opt to play the Maxis and the Ashes. I think this format is best of one, so because it's best of one, it's really quick to end and really quick to decide a game, just depending on what you have as hand traps. I think people who aren't playing hand traps in the Tearlament build are insane. There's different builds, and people are playing things like King in the Swamp, people are playing things like a bunch of going first cards, right? I think that's nice and all. I think being able to combo and stuff like that's cool, but a lot of the times in a format with Max C, when you're getting Max Seed and you have to play a little bit mid-range, you got to think about it that way, right? Sometimes you can't fully commit to the board. Sometimes you have to Max C your opponent, and sometimes you just don't win the die roll, like you just don't win the coin flip. And if you don't win the coin flip, you need to have a fighting chance against the Tearlament deck, right? Against the deck that you're playing against itself. So I think a card like Maxi is really, really important. Activating this obviously can win the game multiple times. Can win the game almost all the time, right? Ash as well too. I think you need like max protection for Maxi while you're playing during your turn, right? Not only that, people I think are playing DD Crow as well too. I thought that was a decent idea. I think DD Crow is really good, especially if you play against the mirror. Like you're kind of sick if you see them mill all these cards and you have no answers to it. However, the space for DD Crow is a little tight. I think you need to have cards that protect you a little more than those ones. So it's an idea. Maybe when the Bastiles come out, we can do something like that. Cool. Next, we're going to talk about Diviner. Diviner the Herald's really good. There's an option, obviously, you can play Ints here, so that way you have like a target to be able to send and be able to pop something on the field. But I think the main thing for it is that it's a starter for any of these, right? Kelbeck or Yugioh, if you're really down bad and you need to. It makes Kelbeck or Yugioh, and then also, like, if you're in a situation where you're playing against Tier, you're going second, and you don't have any shufflers, and you know they have stuff that they're going to do, you can also just normal summon this, send a shuffler, and then all of a sudden, all of their plays during your turn are a little mitigated, right? Because remember, Tearlament can always play on your turn. So if you're able to create a situation where you can protect yourself from their Tearlament effects, then you might be in a better spot, right? So the biggest thing too is that when you normal summon this and you send any of these fairies, it also makes it a level 6. So any of your other level 4s, whether it be Snow, Sharon, or Rhino Heart, becomes Baron de Fleur. So this card's kind of more of like a protection card. I can see you guys bumping it up to 2 if you really wanted to. I think 1 is fine at the current moment though. I don't want to see it that much, especially since we already have 3 Rhino Heart. Cool. The 2 Merly, obviously, the 3 Ash. This card's just too important. I don't think it's very good against Tearlament either, honestly. Maybe you hit a Rhino Heart, maybe you hit a Kit Kalos, sure. But it's just still really good against Gigantic, or still really good against the Maxi. I think that's the most important part about it. But it's probably still cuttable. It's maybe not the best, but it's good enough to be able to protect you, I would say. 2 Hovness. The Hovness is great. Snow. This card's broken. I cannot believe we still have this card. I think this card's in multiples as well too, so we might be able to play this at multiples if you play like a grass deck. I haven't tested anything with grass yet. It sounds pretty broken, but I feel like we don't have enough monsters in the game to be able to play grass. You could probably play like Danger Grass. That might be kind of cool. I'll look into it for sure, but I think Snow is really good. Obviously, if you see it, like, you're just in such a crazy situation if you're milling a bunch of cards. Just remember Maxis in this format, dude. Like, there's so many things that are broken that just get dampered by this card. You really have to think about that. Sharon obviously is broken. Triple Rhino Heart obviously broken. The 2 Keldo and the 3 Medora, these are the shufflers. This is what is going to make you capable of playing the mirror. And not only that, it beats so many rogue decks. The shufflers are just broken. There's a reason these cards are hit. There's a reason the Ishizu cards in general are hit in the TCG. These cards are just so good. The mainline combo with Keldo is really streamlined. Basically what you do is you do Keldo, send Kelbeck. If you have these 2 cards in your hand, this is like a crazy combo where you go Keldo, send Kelbeck, Kelbeck effect to mill 5, and then Keldo on resolution will add a yugioh. After Kelbeck resolves, on resolution you'll be able to special summon the yugioh from your hand as well too. So you'll have the Keldo on the field, the yugioh on the field, and then the yugioh effect when it special summons, obviously it'll special summon back a level 4 Earth Fairy monster from the grave, and that's 3 level 4s right there by itself, and you just milled tier cards, so you don't even know what you have anymore. Like, it's just explosive, right? Very explosive. One of the most explosive combos you have. Not only that, just having the shufflers is great. It's helpful. You want to be able to see it. You need to see it. Like, honestly, if you're playing against the mirror, like, you have to see the shufflers into your grave, otherwise you're screwed. Whoever sees the shufflers faster usually wins the mirror. The 2 Kelbeck and the 2 yugioh, these cards are great. Kelbeck is pretty good as a hand trap. So basically, if your opponent has a special summon monster and they send a card from the hand or deck to their graveyard, you can bounce back a monster. So it's really good for being able to bounce back their link monsters, being able to bounce back just certain cards in general. If they try to hand trap or they send a card from the grave, like, you can just hit their special summon monsters on their side of the field, bounce it back to their hand. And then a yugioh does the same thing, except it'll special summon a level 4, which I just talked about. So it's pretty good. All of these cards are great, honestly. You should definitely max these out no matter what. One should all beast. Now, I didn't want to play this originally, but I realized that there wasn't a lot of fusion monsters that you could go into. Beast is just really nice, obviously, just because it makes it so that when you activate Hovness, or you're able to mill any of these on your opponent's turn, there's a chance that you can just win to your opponent, and you can just auto win during their turn. So it's good for that. It's a little sacky though in my mind. I've always loved Winda though, to be fair, so I think it's a great card, but it helps a lot close out games. And again, like I said, I feel like because of the time standard in Master Duel, I feel like closing out games is more important than going full combo, right? Because obviously there's all kinds of great things you can do, but this card makes it so that mid-range is a little easier, and you can just kind of create end up creating like a hard stun. And if they don't shuffle this back in, or if they don't shuffle this back in or deal with this when it's in the graveyard, then the wind is going to come out eventually, right? They have to deal with the fusions at that point, so that way it makes it so that you always have the threat of, okay, boom, I'm gonna win to you. 1 terraforming, so that way maybe I have 2 Pearl Rhinos, kind of the idea. Drawing them together is kind of sus though. 1 instant fusion, card's broken. 3 Pot of Desires, again, like I said, it's all about the time here. We want to be able to have the strongest plays that we have possible, and I think with Desires, if anything, maybe I cut a terraforming for the 1 prosperity, but I want to be able to see my outs to hand traps, because if I can full combo undeterred, I'm most likely gonna win. Like, almost 100% I'm gonna win, right? So you want to be able to protect yourself going second. Going first, and then going second, this will help you draw into a couple different cards, right? Just Desires in general will help you. Maybe we add a Ward Breaker or 2, so that way you can see into something. But I think just like playing the hand traps in general is nice. These always work as hand traps, and they're nice, yeah. And then obviously the rest is a little self-explanatory, right? Called by the Grave, Cross Out, Designator, all of these cards. So yeah, it's just crazy. I think there might be room for Orange Light. Orange Light's pretty good. It's a little sacky of a card as well too, being at 1, but I think Orange Light is just another way to deter yourself from getting max seed, or to deter yourself from just losing hard to certain things. There might be space for this. I'll see if I can fit it in a bit. Let's talk about the extra deck as well too. Mud Dragon of the Swamp. This is basically makes it so that you can't be targeted by a lot of cards. It's really good. This card's really important in the mirror, because a lot of the times all of our cards target in the mirror, so you want to be able to make this to protect yourself. The one Winda, obviously Kit Kalos, Draco Stapelia, basically he's like a bit cuttable. I wish we had Garura, but like a lot of the times when you do end up making Draco Stapelia, you're in a situation where you can make another interrupt, and it just helps, right? A lot of the times you don't end on this turn 1, but you go into it during your opponent's turn, and it's really good. Rukalos, Kaleido, 1 Baron, 1 Dweller as well too. I think Baron is great. It's kind of rare that you go into it, now that I think about it. But it's pretty good still. What you can do as well too, if you really needed to, is you can basically bring back this Diviner if you dump it. If you milled this, right? If you end on Elf, you Elf effect, bring back Diviner, and then synchro away Rokalos and the Diviner for the Baron. So there's multiple ways that you can make it. The only issue is how often you make it during your turn 1, right? The idea is that you're trying to mill into this Diviner, so that way you can bring it back with the Elf somehow later in the combo. One Dweller, one Baguska. Dweller is obviously going to be huge. Making Dweller turn 1 is actually probably broken. So I would probably try to make Dweller turn 1 as much as possible. Baguska, just in case if you end up in a situation where you get max seed and you don't want to go hard, right? Baguska is really nice. Like you can just make this and then pass, and then hopefully they don't have imperm. He's just really good. He's just skill drain on legs. It makes it makes it so that you get another turn. And if Tearlaments get another turn, usually they're going to go kind of crazy. One Time Thief Redoer. This card is great when it comes to just making or creating another fusion. Basically, the stipulation with Time Thief Redoer is if you activate its effect, it detaches for effect instead of cost. So because of that, it'll detach the monster for effect. So if you have a Sharon underneath it, you trigger its fusion. So then Sharon effect will activate trigger, and then you'll be able to fuse off of the Sharon. So it makes it so that you can keep playing even if you feel like you can't keep playing. Zeus, because Zeus is broken. One dark. I'm expecting to see a lot of tier mirrors, and obviously Sprite is a dark, so you want to be able to have an answer for them. Right, so basically you can bring their cards back and then use their card effects. Not only that, they're level 2, so you can use them to go into elf. Sprite elf, obviously this card's broken. You can set up elf to be able to bring back diviner, or you can set up elf to be able to bring back Merly. These cards are just great, right? Like a lot of the times this is kind of what you're going for. Elf is crazy, you usually want to end on it. One Celine. Obviously Celine's good. The way you make it is with dark, and then when you link off dark, right, you use that to bring back the dark, and then yeah, you basically use that to bring back the dark and then link those away to make access code talker. Nice and easy to be able to break boards. And yeah, that's basically my Tearlaments deck profile. Like I said, I'm gonna go over a couple more combos in the future. With that, basically there's gonna be a couple of replays here. If you guys like the video, like it. If you guys like my channel, subscribe to it, check it out, and I'll see you guys later.